Hi Alice, welcome to the Healing After Infant Loss YouTube channel. Thank you so much for being here today and for sharing your story.
Thanks for having me, Rosie. It's a real pleasure to be with you this afternoon.
So if we start at the beginning, you said that
Mm.
you met Nick via Tinder in 2016. Do you want to talk to me about life before you met him? Had you been dating?
Yeah,
Had you been wanting to have children with other partners? Or so talk to me about that period of life.
of course. Well, without going into too much detail, I'd I'd been single for a while.
Mhm.
So I'd had a few relationships in my 20s, but I kind of would say that I didn't choose to be single, but I led a life that was easier being single. I love to travel. So I was quite fluid in that. And plus, my previous life before my career now, I was working in hospitality. So I was doing, as you can imagine, a lot of hours and moving around the UK. And I got to live in Australia for a period of just over two
Oh, wow.
years as well, which was amazing. So I remember before going on that dating app that it was like, it just felt the time that I did want to meet someone. I was in my early 30s. My friends, I mean, I was constantly going to my friends' weddings. So I felt it was kind of time to do that. In regards to children, I'd kind of always been around children. The conversation had always come up with my friends. Had I thought about children with my previous partners? No, not necessarily. Had I shut it down? Absolutely not. I think I was kind of in that kind of middle ground where I just felt my time hadn't come yet, or
Mhm.
had I met the right person? And that lucky swipe, is it right or is it left? I can't even remember now. Got me meeting Nick. And the most embarrassing thing is, and he knows this, I'm not even sure if it was me. My friends used to take my mobile phone the whole time and were always so excited about who was out there. I think potentially one of my friends may have swiped for him, but thank goodness they did.
That's
That he,
hilarious.
I know he knows that story as well. It was me that actually wrote to him, so I remember doing that. And he sent. I wish I screenshot. Weirdly, we were just talking about this about a week ago. We wish we screenshotted our original messages to each other, but he wrote something about my smile, and I was like, oh, he seems quite genuine. And then and then we met up for lunch close to where I live. And yeah, New Year, what was it, about 9.5 years ago. So it'll be 10 years in January that we'd been together.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you said that you were in your early 30s and you'd seen a lot of friends and, people around you getting married,
Yeah.
having kids.
Yeah.
So that was one of the first conversations you had with Nick was, about starting a family, whether he wanted that as well.
Yeah. So there was there was two things. So I kind of was working because also when I'd met Nick, I knew that I wanted to slightly change my career because I was still working in hospitality. He was kind of in engineering, so predominantly, well, he was 9 till 5, kind of those structured hours where I was still working over a 7-day rota. And I remember thinking, well, I want to kind of be clear and kind of get aligned with him if this is going to be serious. And I was kind of getting the impression that we were spending more time together. So we did have a conversation, one of which was our feelings towards family and starting a family. And the other one was where we we're going to live. So I must have had, this is the other funny story, I must have had my reach quite far on Tinder. So he lived in a different county than me. And I knew I wanted to stay in my county. So the thing was I want to stay in Dorset, which is where I currently live in the UK. And I would like to start a family or to potentially seek the options of and talk about, would you like to start a family? And he was, okay, let's figure out living together. And yes, I'm up for starting a family as and when that potentially would feel right for us. So tick, tick. And that's how it happened.
So you met him in 2016.
Yeah.
And then I saw that in summer 2018, you decided to start trying for a baby.
Yes.
How was that process for you? And like, when did you decide you were ready to start trying, both of you? Because I know that's, sometimes people on different timelines and
Yeah.
it's hard.
Um, so as I said, we were living in different counties. It was around the same time we just moved into moved in together. So I owned a property and Nick owned a property. And quite quickly, after about 18 months, we realised like this is what we wanted to be. Like, it took us a few months, and then we were like, actually, we're completely in love with each other. So and I think at that point, and I speak for myself here, so I can't generalize, but kind of at that point in my life, I just felt that it was time to like go, well, actually, if we're going to be together, let's live together. Luckily for me, he decided to move to my county. So we sold both of our properties and bought one together. And lots of people were like, wow, you're not even going to try renting together or like moving into one of your houses? And we were both like, no. We knew that my place was a little bit too small. His place was physically where I didn't want to be. So we did that. So we moved in together that year. And kind of over the summer, it just became a natural conversation of actually I was getting in towards hitting my mid-30s, and I was like, it just feels right. And I can't tell you the exact moment or why. It was just kind of a gradual thing. So we thought, why not? Let's give it a go. And so we started trying. And I'm not going to go into those details, but yeah.
So that was in summer 2018. And then had your first pregnancy in August 2019. So we're talking about a year. Did you anticipate it taking a year? Because when you're at your mid-30s, I hate that some people don't like that I bring up age, but obviously mid-30s is kind of at that age where people are starting to struggle maybe a little bit, or even sometimes people don't realise maybe in their late, mid-30s that there might be an issue. Did you think there might be, or were you quite hopeful?
I kind of thought there could be. I think, I mean, unfortunately, I had been around some friends who had been and experienced baby loss. I'd also got friends who would kind of look at their partners and fall pregnant. By then, my friends were having babies, and I remember a moment of two of my incredibly close friends, kind of one towards at the end of her first pregnancy, and the other, and we were out for lunch, and the other announcing their pregnancy. And I remember like running to the toilet and actually having a cry. And it was fine, because again, my typical phrase is, I'm so happy for you, but I'm just a little bit sad for me, So we were trying, we were tracking. So I was using an app to track. I was using ovulation tests as well. And then it got to a point where, because of my age, everyone, and I live in England, we've got access to the NHS. So I got an appointment with my GP. He told me that I hadn't quite met the criteria because I was just under 35. So in England, currently, the guidelines are if you're under 35, you have to be trying for a year. If you're 35 and over, 6 months, you can potentially go and get some help. So I kind of got caught in being 34 and just under that period, and being told to come back I think I went to see him around 10 months or so, and just being told to come back after that year, keep doing what we were doing and come back after that year. And then kind of on that year, that month, I found out we were expecting a baby.
How was that when you got your first positive pregnancy test after a year or 10 months of trying?
Yeah, I can remember, again, like all of these things, I really remember it. I just spent the weekend with a very good friend down in Cornwall, and she was pregnant. And it was our last weekend together as girls. And I remember being a bit tired and scoffing a cream tea before I left. And I got back and I was like, And I woke up on that Monday morning, because I spent the weekend with her, and I'm sure all the women out there who are currently in their trying stage can relate to this, have a stash of pregnancy tests in their bathroom drawer. I reached for one, did the thing, and I remember going into bed, and Nick's not a very good morning person, and it was dark because it was September, so the mornings were getting darker, and I was like, I'm like pregnant. And we were like, what? And he's like, the reactions, you go silent, you stare at it, you do another one in 10 minutes time, and for me, that's how it happened. I kept, because the disbelief in actually seeing it, I was kind of, I think Clear Blue, I should potentially get shares in them, to be fair. And I mean, over the next few years, I came to use them a bit more. But I remember feeling incredibly shocked and, of course, incredibly happy.
And then in that moment, like all first-time pregnant people, you think, brilliant, in 9 months, I'm going to have a baby.
Yeah.
You want to talk to me about what happened in the couple of days after that?
Yeah, sure. So you do. I think the funny thing, which I never understood, and I suppose like in life, you don't understand anything until the experience happens to you. When you fall pregnant, even though I saw my friends and very, very close friends having babies and talking about things, and family having babies and talking about things, you don't quite imagine that feeling, because instantly it's your whole life has kind of changed, because you feel, and I remember this very primeval kind of feeling. I became like a mother straight away, like incredibly protective. And I was like, brilliant. So actually, we better cancel that trip because that happens. Oh, we can't do that. Oh, this happens. Oh my God, I can't wait to tell this person. Oh my God, so kind of tick boxing all these things, and quite frenetically, because again, hormones are wild, aren't they? And everything's going on. But I was like living a whole different life from that moment, which was magical until obviously we get to the part where it becomes not very magical.
And do you want to talk to me about that experience?
Yeah. So I was about 10 weeks in, and I had travelled one trip due to work and one trip as a family trip, and it was absolutely fine. And at that point I had, now again, people may agree or disagree with me on this, but I don't believe in the 12-week rule. So I had told my colleagues, my close family and friends as well. I mean, I wasn't shouting it from the rooftop, but I was very open about it if it asked. I mean, and also at that point, people had kind of got the gist that we were trying. Again, it's a funny thing. I didn't necessarily announce that we were trying, but it didn't come as a shock to people. And due to the travel I had with my work, I wanted to be open about it as well. And then I remember being at home, because I was working from home, and I went to the toilet and I saw some spotting. And it was quite a different colour to what I'd ever seen before. So I was like, okay, I didn't go into instant panic, and I discussed it with a colleague, and she was like, oh, actually, as you do here, oh, that happened to me throughout my pregnancy, or this happens. And being your first time, you do rely on those stories from your really valid friendships and people out there. But she advised me to phone the early pregnancy unit, which I did do, and they got me in for a scan. I think I actually had to wait, looking back, about 2 days, or it was the next day. It wasn't the same day. It was either the next day or actually 2 days away. Before the scan, the spotting had increased to a bit of bleeding. And again, a different blood to what I was used to, I think, from my period, and what to expect. So I kind of, then that's when when I saw that's when and that was kind of throughout the evening, that's when I really felt my heart drop a little bit more than, oh, it's just spotting and it happens to everyone.
Yeah. So you went in and then you were told you were having a missed miscarriage?
Correct. So again, I remember the sonographer. I've actually, and we'll talk about it later on, I actually, years later, have seen her again, sadly with the same news, but she was amazing. So kudos to her. So I had external, and then I drank too much water, typical me. So then I had to have an internal scan. And again, to all the women out there, you get very close, up close and personal, so you start to lose your dignity very quickly when fertility issues strike. And they said that the baby was measuring smaller, approximately 7 to 8 weeks. and there wasn't really signs of a heartbeat, but they had to give me a week just to make sure that they were missing something. They didn't want to diagnose it there and then. So I just felt it was just a gut feeling, call it a mother's instinct even. I was just like, after hearing that, I just knew. So we were like ushered into a tiny little room, given leaflets, kind of. I can't even remember then if actually I cried or not, because it's kind of like, okay, this is all happening. And we booked the appointment for a week later. But even though I did go back a week later, I experienced a very heavy bleed, in which case I know now. And it was confirmed the week later was a miscarriage. So, yeah, so lost the baby around 11 weeks.
I'm so sorry that happened.
Thank you. And sorry.
I was going to say, I've also experienced a miscarriage, and it's not an interesting, I don't know how to word it, but you still feel pregnant, but you're told that the baby, well, in my experience, I was 11 and a half weeks, baby was measuring 6 weeks.
Right. Yeah.
The first scan actually was 9.5 weeks, baby measuring 6 weeks. And I was like, it can't be 6 weeks. Like, it just, the maths,
it doesn't work, does it?
I know. It's so impossible. And then went back again at 11 and a half weeks, and it was still 6 weeks this time without a heartbeat, and I had the miscarriage, I think, the day later. But it's a miscarriage, for anybody who doesn't know, is basically you still feel pregnant, you still have the pregnancy hormones, the sore boobs, the sickness, whatever it is, but the baby has stopped growing, and either the heartbeat has stopped or not. And so it's a weird phase where you feel pregnant, you think you're pregnant, but actually the baby isn't growing. So it's such a weird place to be. I'm so sorry you experienced that as well, because I know how hard it is.
Thank you. Yeah, it is really hard, and as we go on to deeper into my story, I'd sadly got to experience it again, and that was a longer wait in between. And I'd just like to express, like you've just said to everyone listening, it is the most bizarre feeling, because your body, you don't trust your body, you lose trust in it, because it's like, but I am pregnant, but I've just been told I'm not. And it's really quite tricky to comprehend. Or I speak for myself, I have found, and it seems like you have, Rosie, as well, have found that it's a very tough transition, that until you physically see the signs that you don't want to ever see, but at least that releases a bit of confusion that your brain has once your baby has passed.
I think then when your body sort of catches up with what's happening, it makes it more real, and your brain can then start to process, because your body is also processing what's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
How did you like heal? Did you seek therapy? Did you talk to anybody? Was there any sort of healing process after that, or was it just very much like, okay, let's get pregnant again, let's do this? Like, what was your process like?
So there were tears, there was phone calls, because like I've mentioned, not believing in the right time to tell people when I was pregnant. So actually what that does do is mean that there's kind of more admin to do actually afterwards, but that's kind of cathartic in itself. My family and friends throughout this whole period of my life have been incredibly supportive, which is amazing. So it was, I'm a talker anyway, and I have an incredibly strong network of friends and peers and stuff. So I didn't seek therapy then. I didn't feel like I needed it. I may have gone back to work too soon, but also for me at the time that felt right. So I'm not looking back at that as a regret at all. I've throughout my period, or my fertility journey as such, I have had very supportive work, and I have chosen, potentially if people said to me, I'm really giving you permission, don't come back, maybe I would have taken more time, but I didn't feel forced into doing it. So life kind of carried on, and that sounds terribly British, doesn't it? And that's not that's also not me dismissing it. I want to say that I was aware what was happening, I felt it, I still feel it, but I didn't feel like I needed any extra support via professionals back then. I'm a great believer in the outdoors. I'm a walker, I'm a runner, so there was lots of nature involved, and lots of kind of solitude, but also going wild at the same time. I think we all have different ways of coping, and it's right for you how you do that.
Looking back, are you glad that you told your friends and family you were pregnant and then you had that support system in place when you did have the miscarriage? Or, like you said, it's kind of extra admin to have to call everyone and tell everyone you're no longer pregnant. Do you have any thoughts on that, of which way might have been best? Or
that's hard to say because I can only go by what I felt. I would say I don't regret informing my friends, family and colleagues that I was pregnant pre-12 weeks. I think you picked up, I think that was, for me, it was the right thing. And I actually, in some ways, facing it full on and having to have those difficult conversations instead of hiding it, I think was part of my healing process. So it's confronting, ringing up your mum to tell them that you're not having their grandchild anymore. It's really confronting and it's sad. So I think living in that sadness with your parents, your close female friends, male friends, colleagues is helpful. But again, I always like to caveat, I speak for myself. I don't want to ever generalize here.
yeah. So that was in 2019. You had your second pregnancy in August 2020.
Yeah.
At what stage did you decide to start trying again? Because I know that, like, some people want to try straight away. Some people want to leave it for months and sort of process what was happening. Or what was it like for you? When did you start trying again?
I think it took us a few months because but then, and I think it was it was a bit of an it just kind of happened again. It wasn't kind of like, okay, we're going to start now. It just felt the right time. From memory, it just felt the right time. So, but definitely it took me a couple of months. And then you kind of go, okay, it's not going to happen if we don't try, and we want this to happen. So you kind of, again, have to force yourself. That's the wrong expression. But you have to kind of say to yourself, it's not going to happen if we don't do this. So as much as maybe it might feel a bit uncomfortable, even though it's the most natural thing in the world, we've got to do this. So we did. And again, it felt like it took a long time, or was going to take a long time. But then I got another positive pregnancy test. August 2020, in the midst really of the pandemic.
Yeah. If we go back to you saying about it just being, a bit forced and things, I remember when we were trying, I was like, okay, we've got these 3 days, we need to have sex every day. Like, let's get it done. And it's funny because it does kind of take the romance out of the relationship a little bit when you're like, I'm ovulating, it needs to be today and tomorrow and the next day, or, whatever it's planned to do it. But I think that's also a side of fertility that people don't often talk about as well, that people always think, oh, I'm pregnant, it's magical, and where actually for some people it takes a lot of planning and a lot of like the ovulation sticks, figuring out when we're going to be doing our thing. It's interesting that you brought that up as well.
I mean, the romance is tough. I think particularly when you have a prolonged period of a fertility journey or your fertility experience, but totally with you, Rosie, like it becomes mechanical because you're like, you've got an app for this, you're weeing on this stick, you're doing this stick, you're doing this, you're checking your boobs, you're looking at your mucus, you're kind of like, oh no, come back from work early, this is peak, not that I've ever been in a military atmosphere or anything, but it feels, using that kind of expression where it becomes that military. And I think, again, that's one thing that was never really came into my mind, or no one ever really talks about, or still doesn't talk about. Kind of, actually, you kind of see, me and my friend joke about these Hollywood pregnancies, which is you see on the movies. You kind of have this amazing intimate sex, and then you fall pregnant and have a baby 9 months later. And I would say there's a very high percentage where sadly that doesn't happen, and the stats back that up, but the conversation doesn't back it up. So, it's amazing that you've started this channel, because I think it's a great way for so many people to express and share their stories, and hopefully, give a bit of insight into what it can be like.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so then that was in August 2020. You had your second pregnancy.
Mm-hmm.
That also ended in a miscarriage. Do you want to talk about your experience with that?
Sure. So we were camping because that's what you could do in the pandemic. And we were just about to hire some bodyboards. And I was like, I just feel a bit weird. I'm just going to get a pregnancy test from the local corner shop. Went and used the public toilets. And then I was like, it wasn't really I couldn't really see anything. We sat down on the beach. And then I just looked at them again so publicly this time. I mean, you start to just lose all sense of like what's right and what's actually socially wrong and right throughout fertility. And I was like, oh my goodness, there's 2 lines again. Nick was like, what? And so I dashed back to the corner shop again. And then I didn't have any wee left. So drinking water. Then they say don't drink too much water because it dilutes it anyway. Yeah. So after some faint lines, they got stronger. So again, the same thing. I actually told my work straight away because it was going through a bit of a transition. So I was just being honest that was like going to be, I was going to go through a transition as well. Same thing, happily told my family. So this is obviously between the 4 to 6 week mark, which I know is very early. And then I just started bleeding and I just knew. So I called up the early pregnancy unit, and because I was on the dot of 6 weeks and being the pandemic, they wouldn't see me because I think it had either been classed as 5 weeks and 6 days or something, but they would only scan over 6 days, 6 weeks and 1 day, and they were choosing who they were. And I'm not angry about that. It was fine. I felt weirdly at peace. I just had to put trust in my body to know what it was doing. And I miscarried naturally at home. And that was that. I messaged my GP to get it recorded onto my file. I had no follow-up or aftercare because, again, that's when everything was done kind of over the phone and e-consults and everything. But again, I'm not angry about that time. That was just the way the world was back then. It feels very strange to say it, doesn't it? That we thought we'd never get over this pandemic, and now years later it feels very fuzzy. And did it really ever happen? And I think particularly at that time, I still had a network around me, even though there was still, even though we got to go on holiday, we were in and out of lockdowns, weren't we, throughout that whole year? So there was lots of talking and supporting done from afar and on the telephone and everything. And again, lots of walking still, lots of running, and still not necessarily any more further professional help I felt was needed then.
Yeah. You wrote as well in the email that you sent me about you kind of felt grateful for the prior experience to know what to expect. And even though that feels weird to say, like, oh, I'm grateful I had a miscarriage because now I know what to expect with this one, I completely understand, because once you've been through one, all 3 of mine were very different, but it gives you some sort of level of expectation of like, okay, well, this is how I can make myself comfortable. This is what I need. This is what's happening. Is that kind of what you experienced? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, absolutely, Rosie. And let me say that it's one thing that we should never be grateful for. I would never want anyone to ever feel to be grateful over experiencing baby loss in any form, or any sort of grief, actually. But I think particularly at that point in the world and that point in my life, I was grateful for it, because we were more isolated than we ever were before. It felt that I knew, but like you said, all of my miscarriages were different. But I felt like I just knew what was coming, and that actually, because in the end, I found trust back in my body, because I did have a natural loss in the end the first time, even though it took longer, or the body to process that. I felt that my body did know what it was going to do, and I knew what I needed to do and what sort of space I needed, or what time off I needed, and all of those things that surround it. So there shouldn't be a silver lining, but maybe throughout the pandemic there was a very, 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 very tiny one that was helpful to me.
I think as well, this might sound wrong what I'm about to say, but I guess if you look back at it, had you had your first miscarriage during the pandemic, that would have been a very scary, isolating place, because you're not able to go to the doctors, you're not able to get scans and talk to people, so I know you're not grateful for first miscarriage, but it makes sense that you had a sense of calm or a sense of trust of like, I know my body is going to do what it needs to do to get me through whatever's happening. So
yeah, and you know, my heart goes out to anyone who may have experienced loss at that point in their life, or anyone, number one, anyone that's experienced baby loss, full stop. But I think and even had successful pregnancies at that time, not your partner not being able to go into the hospital with you, you know, maybe not even being able to go into the labour suite with you and everything. So it was an incredibly odd time, really, in summary, wasn't it? So yes, you know, overall there was just, like I said, a tiny glimmer that I felt that I had a previous experience that I could know that I would be all right. And I remember feeling that, like, even though when it's so dark and so deep for you, I still knew I was going to be all right at some point. Not like straight away, but I knew I'd be okay.
So that one we're talking about happened in August 2020.
Yeah. You
then fell pregnant again for the third time in February 2021. So I guess about 6 months later.
Yeah.
8 months, something like that.
Yeah.
Fortunately, you had another miscarriage at 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk to me about that experience, about getting the pregnancy test? Did you tell family and friends? Were you excited? Were you more nervous this time? What were the emotions behind it as well?
The emotions become kind of, what's the right word? I think the emotions become more controlled. So after 2, you do all your Googling and all your reading up, and you start talking to people, and then, you know, this and that, and, you know, can I get referred? Can I do this? And then you go, actually, and I think that's sadly what happens even after the first loss, that feeling, the innocence goes, I would say, or my innocence went. So, and I think innocence is quite a nice feeling when it comes to babies and to pregnancy. But sadly, I felt that maybe that had lost. So you become quite a realist. And this time, it was a bit earlier than just before 6 weeks. So I hadn't really told, I actually hadn't told friends or family. I told a couple of really close friends who were inspecting the pregnancy tests with me again. And obviously my partner. And then I remember going, oh, okay. And then again went to the toilet, and I was bleeding. And again, call it instinct again, I just knew. So I didn't even feel like I needed to try and even get to the early pregnancy unit. I just rang up my GP. And again, we're still in a bit of a funny time, February 2021. So I just made sure that it was registered with my GP, because again, in England on the NHS, you have to have 3 registered losses to be able to again get any further tests or deeper care. And what was happening to me, Rosie, was I was getting stuck in the system. So I was kind of slightly stuck in the system at the age of 34, just before my first pregnancy, then fell pregnant. And then I fell pregnant the second time just before a year, which meant that no tests were going to happen because you have to wait another year. So what's happened with me is, unfortunately, I'm just that person that was getting stuck, and then the 8 months were coming around again. So in some way, it was tinted with a bit of relief that actually I'd hit the magic number. And that's like such an kind of awfully gross way of describing it, but it was kind of like, at least now I feel like I've had 3 losses where someone may take this seriously now, and I can go to the doctors without them going, come back in a year, or you have to have another miscarriage. And hearing those words when you've lost a baby, telling them that, you know, they're telling you that you have to lose another one before it's looked into it, I think there's quite a lot of, I remember feeling at certain points kind of a bit of anger around, well, people can go in and get blood tests even if they say they're tired. Why can't I kind of get some things checked out when a medical thing has happened to me? And people forget that pregnancy is like, it's medical, it's not just natural. There's a lot of, you know, it's a huge process, and it's a huge toll physically as well as mentally on your body. So after that miscarriage, I remember feeling, okay, first thing is, let's do an e-consult, let's tell the GP, and let's push for some extra testing.
want to circle back on what you said about having to have 3 miscarriages before you get help. I would love to know who made that rule, because I'm pretty sure it isn't a woman who has experienced 3 miscarriages. It's probably a guy somewhere who's like, no, just let him lose 3 babies, then we'll take him seriously. Like, what the fuck is that? Like, seriously, like having 1 miscarriage is devastating enough without then having to have 2 more to prove that you would like some help and some assistance and some tests, whatever it is. Like, I just like it gets me really angry. You said about getting angry. It gets me angry because I think it's fucking insane. I think it's bananas. I think something needs to change. Women need more support. They need to be believed. They need to be listened to. It shouldn't be, have your heart broken 3 times and then we'll help you. Like, no, how about we help people before they get their heart broken even once? Why aren't we giving people drugs and tests and things before they even experience that amount of heartache? It's just...
I know, I'm totally with you. I think my mission is more towards the latter part of this year is to understand that a bit more. There's some amazing organisations out there, Tommy's being a particular one that's campaigning, for at least to lower that to 2. But I agree with you. Who on earth created that rule book? I have absolutely no idea, and I'm sure me and you would have a few words to say to them once we found out who did. But it felt a very strange system to be stuck in, and in some ways I was just it just felt strange, because I felt that potentially there's no hierarchy in illness. But I felt like maybe I should just go and say that I'm really tired, and see if I can just get some regular blood tests or something. Do you know what I mean? I was like, how can I change that? And even my friends were like, can you just say that you've had a miscarriage? And I was like, no, you can't say that. But it creates these crazy thoughts in your head. Like, how do I beat the system? How do I come around it? Then you start looking at your bank balance. Do I go private? And another conversation that I'm sure you agree with me on is the price of fertility care privately in the UK, and I think in many other countries, although on the continent I think it's a bit more reasonable. But again, North America, this huge expense that actually is a real barrier to people to who get stuck in a system like I did, of going, oh, I'll just wait another month. No, do I invest that £1,000 on that blood test? Oh no, do I wait? It becomes a very difficult emotion to manage sometimes.
I think you said as well about, saying, oh, I had a miscarriage even if you didn't have one. And I think we probably shouldn't be doing that. But I also understand the logic behind it in terms of like, well, what is it going to take for me to get the help that I'm asking for? Like, do I really actually need to go through another miscarriage, or can I just say it and then save myself that heartache, because it's probably going to happen anyway? That would be my mindset anyways. Like, it's probably going to happen anyway. Just say it happened, and then at least then I can help that I need.
And I'm not condoning it at all. I'm just trying to be really searingly honest with you and the listeners here that those conversations happened, and I really empathize with anyone who's potentially thinking that. But of course I didn't do that, and I wouldn't want people to do that. It was just me expressing that these all sorts of things go through your brain at those points, particularly with your hormones raging as well.
I understand. So you started doing NHS testing, and everything came back normal. What was that process like? Did they listen to you? Were they happy to do testing? What did they test?
If I'm really honest, and I should have got out all of my results. So I became one of these people that would log. I made sure I got online access to my blood results, but of course they didn't mean anything to me at all. So I'd say the basic blood, thyroid, iron, all of those basic blood tests. And again, what does normal mean? So you just don't know. And then I did fork out, did invest in and it was a Zoom meeting at that point still with a private doctor locally, and he was saying, well, just get all these tests, or we should do that, and then you're looking at the cost of that. And then I'm like, well, and actually the NHS are going to do that. So it felt to me that year was just a bit of a long drawn out process, and I kept getting letters back saying that these are all normal. So I kind of remember thinking that Okay, well, it's all normal. That's just unlucky. Yeah. And even some of the language, I have to say, that's used around fertility and baby loss is quite scary. You know, doctors kept calling my miscarriages episodes. It's another thing that I would like to, you know, start kind of really getting involved in regards to our language that surrounds all of that. It's not an episode. It's a death. It's a loss. It's a miscarriage. But I didn't quite know where episode came from. And also just a bit more time and consideration over explaining what normal means and what the next steps were. We were basically kind of just told to the recurrent miscarriage does happen. So recurrent miscarriage is when you've had 3 or more losses. Yeah. Just explaining to anyone who may not know that, you become kind of a stat. 1 in 100. Is it 1 in 100, Rosie? I think the stat is.
I'll put it on screen. I just want to double check stats. I'll put it on screen somewhere.
But we can double check the stats. But you become this stat, and then you just kind of get sent away and get told to carry on again.
I think as well the language. I think I had 2 miscarriages. Well, one in Cuba and then one in the US. And I think what's it called over there? It's called like a something abortion.
Really? What, in Cuba or America?
No, in America. Rather than a miscarriage, it's called like a... Oh, I'll have to leave it on screen again. I can't think of the word, but I remember being like, because I had a termination for medical reasons at 26 weeks, yes, which is an abortion. And then my 2 other miscarriages being called like an elective abortion. No, not elect. What was it? Something abortion. I was like, I didn't have 2 of the fucking abortions. Yes. Like I had one, yes, but I didn't have the other 2, and I hated that language. That
well, and it wasn't an abortion that you had. You know, it was a medical reasons that you yeah, sadly lose your first baby, which I'm incredibly sorry for. So, I know the language around it is quite archaic.
Yeah.
And it's be interesting to hear that in different countries. That's one thing I don't know much about is this process. Obviously, it's all happened to me in England in the same primary care trust. I've been based in Dorset throughout the last 6 years of this experience of my life, should we say. So, it's you know, it's it needs to change, I would say. There's points where it needs to change.
So that was the 3rd pregnancy was in February 2021.
Yes.
And then in January 2022, you got pregnant again for your 4th pregnancy.
Yes.
When did you start trying again? What was that like trying again? Yeah. You know, what was the heat like after the 3rd miscarriage? Where are you at with all that?
Well, again, I can't really remember. I think, again, it just goes down to, and I said this before, that we knew we wanted a baby. So we knew we had to start trying again. I think I remember always throughout miscarriages, it probably took me around 2 to 3 months to feel comfortable. But then again, the desire, the motherly instinct, the desire, the want or the need kind of takes over. So you get back on... Well, pardon the expression, you get back on it. Exactly. So you just do. And I remember Nick and I sometimes do this reflection piece at the end of each year and before the new year, where you're like, what was great this year? What do you want to take forward into the next year? What's what do you want to achieve this year? And I remember particularly that winter where we were just like, oh, I really want to have a baby this year in 2022. Yeah, this is our year. And then at the end of January, I saw a bloody positive pregnancy test. I thought, bloody hell, this is great. Maybe I should manifest a bit more often. And I remember this time feeling like super excited for like the first time. Because I was super excited the first time, but like I said, I was pragmatic in the sense I was aware of baby loss. But I remember this time going, I've had 3. This is like my time. Nick and I have decided we wanted a baby in 2022. This is really great. And I was like, great, it's happening. It's like really, really happening. And I remember going, well, it's not going to, and this time I like let myself go and I was like, it's happening. Like, that's it. And I remember phoning the GP because it was the 4th time, because lots of research from Tommy's about progesterone in early pregnancy could potentially support the pregnancy if you've had recurrent miscarriage. And the GP was like, no, he was a locum, and I probably should have pushed a bit harder, but again, you just don't know. He was just like, there's no need. My guidelines saying that you could, it doesn't make much difference if you do or if you don't. If you fall naturally, usually it's used as a supportive through IVF. So we didn't do that. And I was feeling good, told friends and family, probably a smaller circle, but still told friends and family. Yeah, and then I went to the toilet at work and I was like, devastated.
How many weeks were you for this pregnancy?
It was just over, I think it was about 7 weeks. So again, I never want to say all my miscarriages were first trimester, and that makes it any different, because going back to the beginning of our conversation, like, you create a life for yourself that is very different, even though the baby physically isn't in your arms. Your whole dreams and hopes and desires and everything, change at that moment. And I remember thinking, God, bloody hell, really? So I came back and the body did its thing. So I didn't feel I needed to be scanned. I knew what was happening by this point. And I remember thinking, okay, well, that is a bloody shame.
Yeah. I think especially, like you said, you'd had 3 miscarriages.
Yeah.
You'd manifested it. You were sure it was going to happen. You got pregnant. And I'm sure you must have thought, okay, I've dealt with all that shit. It's now my turn to be happy. It's now my turn to be a mum and have a baby and live that life. And then again, for that to happen, it just must have been so devastating. I'm so sorry that you've experienced it.
It was. I honestly kind of, because if you don't lean into it, you don't enjoy anything. So I was like, I had to get to a point where I was like, okay, this time I'm going to lean into it. And then sadly, the reality of it, miscarriage came true again. Nick, and again, it's difficult because I don't want to speak for him on his behalf because obviously he's not here. But I know that he's always been way more terrified about it. And I think it's really difficult for partners to express that when they're trying to support the person who's, the baby carrier as such, going through it. It's their emotional loss, but the physical side, the other one's carrying. So it's a really testing time in people's relationships, this baby. And I'm sure you understand what I'm saying, Rosie. It brings out some interesting conversations that you have to have between you both that you never thought you would have as a married couple, as a partnership. You never thought you would have to go that deep, but you're forced to.
I mean, my husband just said, he's like, we don't have children, we're not trying, I don't know if we ever will again.
Okay.
But he said, the thought of me being pregnant is terrifying for him, because every time he goes to the toilet, he's literally like, is she about to be crying and have blood everywhere and have to deal with me being a crying mess for a couple of days or weeks or however long it is? And like, it physically happens to us, but I think it's also hard to see your partner going through that as well, and not being able to help, not being able to do anything to stop it from happening. So I think it's hard on both sides.
It's so hard. And I think there's some great research that's just come out, because it's Father's Day in the UK this coming Sunday. And again, Tommy's Miscarriage Association over here have released some really interesting stats about the emotional toll it takes, and the unspoken emotional toll that it takes on the partners. So, again, to all the listeners out there that, open up, because there's people out there, we get it, and the more people that speak about it, whatever side you are on, is going to be more positive for others.
Yeah. So you spoke about Tommy's there.
Yes.
So the next year, in 2023, you ran the London Marathon.
I did. What can I do?
That's bananas. I've also signed up for a marathon for next year. I don't run, so I don't know why on earth I thought I'd sign up for it. But how was that? How was running the marathon?
Oh, you know what, Rosie? After all what we've talked about, a smile comes back on my face. It was one of the best days I've ever had in my life.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was really special. So in 2022, obviously, we experienced the loss at the beginning of the year. My partner Nick's brother and his girlfriend were running the London Marathon, and that's when it was in October, because it still hadn't switched because of the pandemic. And we didn't go up physically to support them, but we watched it. And I saw them coming over the finish line, and I just thought, what an amazing achievement. And this is coming from, again, as I've mentioned, someone that likes to be outside and classes themselves as a walker and a runner. But my physical well-being had been up and down through all the losses. So my consistency in long distance running, I mean, I had done a half a marathon years and years and years before, but I'm a bit of a short distance girl. I just like being outside, really. And it really hit me. And I was like, look at what they've achieved. And I felt like I had to give back, because what I just want to hop back to is after my fourth loss, I phoned the Tommy's midlife line, midwife. That's the problem with midlife. You get your words wrong. Midlife, I can't even say it now. Midwife line. And I still named.
They probably need to change the name of that. It's a bit hard. It's a bit tongue twisted.
I know. Please, Tommy's. And I'll name drop her now. And I think she still works for them. Her name was Sophie. And she was like transformational. She gave me so much time. And it was just like one conversation. And I think I don't remember as a kid like having a teacher that I'd always look up to or always remember. But there are other points in my life. And this was one of them. Sophie was just amazing. So big shout out to her. And for some reason, it was a very visceral reaction. I was so proud of Ali and Matt for crossing the finish line. I wanted to give back. I wrote my story and I just wrote to Tommy's and I was like, I want to commit. I want to run for you. And that was in 2023. It was the first time that they were bringing the marathon back to the April date. And I got a message back and I bloody got in, didn't I? They bloody gave me a place. And I was like, oh, I've got to run this thing now. So I trained throughout the winter, which is good for me. I don't like running in the heat. That's midlife for you, that you end up not wanting to run in the heat. And we did it. And I had my family, my mum, my stepdad, my dad, my stepmum, my brother, who was just about to move to Africa the 2 weekends afterwards. Him and his partner came up to support me, a really close friend. And I was like, this is really happening. And I loved every moment of it. And I had so much support, not just financially from people, which I did. I'm really proud to say I raised about $4,500 for Tommy's. But also it did what I wanted it to do. It started opening conversations up with friends who I'd had a long time, who didn't, when you start writing your story down and people reading it, it just provokes different sorts of conversations. I use social media quite a bit to talk about it. So it invited kind of acquaintances that I'm connected with on social media to talk, to tell me their stories and us to have conversations. And I just remember getting to the finish line and just like going, I want to do it again. And then, you're so heightened. And then we went to the Tommy's after party and I had the best massage I ever had in my life. I was lucky enough to have one man on each leg, which was lovely. And yeah, the support. I actually went up to support a friend this year. So I was a spectator this year. And again, it was still one of the best days I'd ever had. Like, I saw this amazing video that described it. Like, this person had thought that a marathon was a sporting event, but the London Marathon is so very different. It is just the best of humanity. The support for complete strangers is out there. So, and I think getting Tommy's out there, a huge believer. And that was the first challenge I did for them. I've done a second one since last October, was a beautiful way, and again something to celebrate through all the sadness. There's still these moments of joy that you can have, and that was a huge moment of joy for me.
I think also doing something like the marathon where it is so physically challenging and mentally challenging, I assume as well. It must be such a like a, oh my God, I can do hard things. Like I just did the fucking London Marathon. Like I've got this.
And again, I've talked about trust in your body, and I think that can be easily lost when you experience periods of baby loss and infertility, baby loss. And when you trust your body to run like 26.2, don't forget the 0.2 miles, that it can do amazing things, and you start to feel proud again, and you know that your body can do things and your mind can go places where you thought, again, you think you've gone to the depths, but physically it brings another mental toll to it. And I remember at mile 20 doing a bit of a body check because I was chugging along, and my aim was to run all the way round. I didn't want to stop and walk. I wanted to run. And I was like, I've hit 20 miles. Wow. And I'm running. Hang on, how are my legs feeling, my toes feeling, my calves, like my hips? And I was like, I feel all right. Okay, I'm going to see my family again at 22 miles. I'll keep going for 22 miles. Saw the family, gave them big hugs and tears and lots of whooping and everything. And then did another check, and I was like, I can keep going. And yeah, it's great to know that your body can still do those physical feats when it hasn't done amazing physical feats years previously.
Yeah, it gives you belief back in yourself again. In your body.
Massively. And other people believe in you, which is an amazing thing. You know, it's just all round achievement. I think obviously achievement must be a value of mine. It just felt really positive and very joyful.
Yeah. So that is incredible that you did the marathon. Well done. So proud of you. I wish I'd have been there to cheer you on and support you as well with your friends and family. It's amazing.
Thank you.
So that was in 2023.
Yes.
And in October, you were also referred to the NHS-funded IVF. Can you talk to me about that process? Did you have to go through the doctor's office to get them to start putting you through the system?
Yeah. So, you know, I was thinking, where are we going with our journey? What's going on? We were continuing to try to have a baby, and it just wasn't happening. Yes, my body was exercising a bit more than it normally had been throughout the previous years because of the marathon training at that point, but nothing that, you know, like I said, I was consistently being outside. It wasn't like I started running from scratch, so I felt comfortable. So then I wrote back to the GP and was like, you know, we're talking over 18 months now. It's not happening. We've had 4 losses. Our blood results are normal. What's going on? So they referred us to our local hospital, the specialist, and we started to say that we could actually qualify for, they thought IVF would be our next best step, because it's coming up to 2 years of not being able to conceive a baby. Would we be up for it? And I would qualify for it because I was getting to my late 30s at this point, so I'd just about qualified for it. So that was October, and 2 years the official qualification is 2 years, which would be the January. So we had all of our initial meetings, and we decided it would be a way that we wanted to explore to try and conceive. And so we went for, between October to December, we went for all of our initial checks, but they couldn't officially kind of put the paperwork through to the new year, which was January 2025, which would be last year. Yeah, January of last year.
So then did you stop trying within that couple of months? Were you like, let's just not get pregnant because we don't want to jinx the IVF thing. We don't want to get kicked off the list again.
Yeah. And again,
that's what I've done as well.
My understanding in the UK, which again, there's lots of campaigning for, that different primary care trusts offer different rules and regulations, should we say, over IVF treatment for women, different age brackets, how many rounds you're allowed, if you get pushed back, because I think Dorset has actually since changed, but if you had a miscarriage, that would count as a pregnancy, so you'd have to wait another 2 years. And it wasn't like I was petrified of getting pregnant, because I would have preferred to fall pregnant naturally, but I just was losing energy by then, and it was like, oh, we're on the peak of this, And actually, why don't we just give ourselves a few months of the pissing on sticks? It became a thing. I've even written a poem called Pissing on Sticks, because that's what takes over your life. So we did stop trying, because I thought we're on the brink here, and actually we've made a decision. And sometimes in life, when you make a decision about anything, even if it's right or wrong, sticking with it and just following that through is like the best thing. So I just thought, we'd made a decision. I just don't want to upset the apple cart here.
Yeah. So then in January 2024, the IVF was approved.
Yes.
And in May 2024, you started treatment. So why did it take 5 months though? Is that just because of paperwork and logistics, or was that more of your decision?
No, it's paperwork and logistics. So with NHS funded treatment, and a recommendation, particularly in the UK, is to have a high COSI treatment before IVF, which is when I call it a party in the fallopian tubes. Basically, they push foam party. I call it foam party in the fallopian tubes. They push a dye. It's actually not foam, it's dye. I got told it was foam, and I was like, great. But it's actually a dye.
Foam party!
Yeah, exactly. I was like, brilliant. And I had other similar treatments on the NHS to check this, not just ultrasounds, but I can't remember the name of them, but I remember them, certain fluids pushed up into certain orifices to check everything. So with the foam party, what happens on the NHS is that, where I was being seen, is that literally the consultant could only do them on the last Thursday of every month, and they were booked up for 3 months or something. So I was like, what? So actually, this is when we did decide to dig into our pockets, and we paid at the clinic that we'd chosen to do our IVF treatment at, because what happens is the NHS actually pay a private clinic for your NHS treatment. My assumption was you just go to your local hospital and it all happens there, but we were given the option of 3 different clinics, and what happens is, they send the invoice to the NHS instead of sending the invoice to your inbox. So we decided the clinic that we actually chose, we decided to pay privately for the high COSI. So we went over in February to do that, late February, pay for the privilege of, again, losing your dignity quite a lot, and a relatively uncomfortable experience of a phone party, get a report, and that can go on, and then the final paperwork can be put through. And then, of course, by the time that happens, that was late February, and then paperwork put through in March, and then you have to work with your cycles. So then by the way my cycles happened in March, it was too late, so I had to wait for my April cycle to finish, and that's kind of what brought us on to kind of treatment in May.
Okay. Can you explain what a high COSI is? You said about his dye in your fallopian. So is it a test, or is it a treatment, or do you know?
I'm really not a medical expert, so I apologise to anyone if I'm explaining this terribly badly. But how it was explained to me was it's a dye or a fluid that goes through into, which they pass through into your uterus, and they push into your fallopian tubes to check if there's any blockages. So what happens, and quite often, sometimes, not necessarily because polyps and so forth would show up on ultrasounds, but sometimes they can be very fine or small, very small blockages that may stop eggs actually coming right through into the uterus, or the sperm actually connecting with the egg in the fallopian tube. So what they actually recommend is everyone has this treatment. Number one, to see if that happens, because I think the dye shows up on a scan, and then what it naturally does is flush anything that shouldn't be in there. Not that there should be much else in there, but if there is anything that your body has collected or anything like that, it gets rid of it to make sure that there's full access for your eggs, particularly obviously once you start hormone treatment with IVF, because what you're doing is then putting your eggs into stimulation, because you want, instead of actually releasing 1 a month, they want to actually collect as many eggs as they can, so they need access to them. I hope I've explained that right.
Well, it makes sense to me. I have no idea what it is, so I understand from what you said, so that makes sense.
Great.
So then in May you started treatment. Do you want to talk to me about that in terms of the injections and the hormones and that whole process? Because
am I allowed
you feel like a bit of a scientist, don't you, at home, like mixing up solutions and injecting yourself? And yes, you're allowed to swear if that's what you're about to ask.
I was going to, just because there's a slightly funny story to it. But so I was put in, your own cycle shut down. So you get an injection and my cycle was shut down. Again, I was 39 at this point, so I turned 40 last June, so we're on the edge of me turning 40. So my natural hormone was suppressed, and then you get given. You're totally right, Rosie. You get given all these little bottles and injections and everything like that. So I was like, oh, and then what you have to. My treatment was that I had to put solution into this bottle, suck it up, and then put it into another bottle. I'm sure that you're nodding with me along this, and I'm sure all your IVF warriors out there are nodding along, listening to this as well. So we did that. So you know what, the injections and I were okay for me. That was fine. What wasn't fine, and the side effect, this is where about the swearing comes in. What the side effect that wasn't fine was Nick could basically breathe and I'd tell him to fuck off, basically. So it became a bit of a joke that I kind of scrolled down like the side effects, and I was like, oh no, it doesn't tell your partner to fuck off. No, partner, fuck off. He would look at me and I would like, what the fuck are you looking at? He was like, you're not an aggressive person. I'm like, oh my God, it's the hormones.
Oh God, I'm sorry to laugh, but that is hilarious.
No, it is funny because we laugh at it, and I want people to laugh at it, because what people don't realise, and I'm sure if there's any partners listening to this, they're nodding away, but he always tells the story himself now. He was like, the one side effect that is not listed by all these, these chemical biologists is telling your partner to fuck off just by looking at them. So, yeah.
So your relationship was great during that period of time. You were thriving.
Do you know what's so weird is I wasn't telling anyone else to fuck off apart from him. And the other thing is, so then, the realities of IVF, which I wasn't aware of even going into it, was how time consuming it is. Now, where I live, and this might not be for everyone, but I was about, on a good run, 1 hour and 40 minutes from my clinic. On a bad run, 2 hours.
Yeah.
You go through a period of 2 to 3 weeks of injections and scans to see how your follicles are developing, because your follicles are going to be releasing the eggs. And it's really time consuming, Rosie. And like I said, maybe that's just because the physicality of where I am. And I'm sure there's people that are even further away from their clinics. But you're talking what they class as a baseline scan. So you might only be seen for 15 minutes, but that's your whole day gone. And as a full-time working woman, it's tough. Career and fertility doesn't always match sometimes. So there was 1 week I just asked for it off because I had 3 planned trips, and I was just like, I'm just going to take it off. And again, it's not always possible. And I had supportive people around me, and I could take that late holiday. But yeah, I was just like, it was a Monday, Wednesday and Friday I had to be in. And so it was kind of, that we became in a routine. We'd get in the car, we'd stop at a garage, we'd buy 2 chocolate Whispers, we'd eat them. Yeah, exactly. Chocolate became a thing. Chocolate is a thing in my life, but it became even more of a thing. We'd go up, you'd know everyone by name. Nick would always have a coffee machine and never know how to work the bloody coffee machine.
That's why you like to fuck off.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, how many times?
Use that fucking machine.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, how many times have you been here, for fuck's sake? So it's, I feel like we were, again, it's not, luck has got nothing to do with fertility, but we had a nice clinic, it was good. We had good people looking after us. But it's time consuming. It's really time consuming.
It's time consuming, but it's also, tiring and emotionally tiring. Like, it's tiring, you know, there's all the hormones, but there's also the 2 hour drive and the 2 hour back or whatever it is. And like the emotions of like, oh my God, have we got eggs? Is it working? You know, is this going to be worthwhile? Are we doing the right thing? Like, it's a whole, it's not, you know, it's a lot of everything. There's a lot that goes with IVF treatment. It's not just like, you know, people say, oh, just do IVF as if it's like super easy and simple and whatever. It's not. Like, it's emotionally exhausting, physically exhausting, a lot of time, a lot of energy and organization and planning and scheduling and making sure you're taking the injections at the right time each day. And it's so much.
Oh my God. And the pressure of the trigger shot. So just to explain, a trigger shot is a large dose of hormones that makes your eggs finally come out of the follicles that you have to do 48 hours before you go in for your egg collection. And, you know, the pressure of doing that. And I actually set an alarm, and I was with a friend at the time because I was actually just completing an intro to counselling course, actually, and we were just submitting some coursework because she was actually on the same course. And the alarm was going off, and I'm like, why is the alarm going off? And she was like, you set it for your trigger shot. And I'm like, oh, to the fridge. You know, it becomes this calamity of kind of like, oh, I've got to do this, it's in the fridge, no, that's the broccoli, no, get the trigger shot. It's, you know, it's a lot. And I think, touching on your point, I think IVF today, even in 2000 and where are we? What year are we in? We're in 2025, aren't we? Yeah. It's just kind of misunderstood a lot. You know, this word just do IVF, like you said. It's not possible to do that.
So when you went in for the egg retrieval, you got 5 eggs retrieved.
Yes. Yeah.
What did you think about that number and the whole process?
Do you know, at the time, I was like, oh, five chances. And the embryologist said to us afterwards, well, that's kind of what we're expecting with your age, they said. And I was like, okay. And it wasn't till I went away and started Googling that was like well below average. Or it felt well below average. And the more people I follow now on social media are kind of like saying that they've got like 20 eggs. And I'm like, oh, I only came away with 5. But, you know, I felt I had 5 chances, and 5 chances was better than no chance. So that, again, typical me, always looking at the positive, but I felt that was good. So what happens is I was funded for 1 live round of IVF, and if any further embryos survived, the NHS would pay for a frozen round of IVF, and that was it. And they pay for storage up to a year. And then if any furthermore after that survived, that would be when you can either decide to pay the clinic, stay with the clinic that you went with initially, or you can transfer your embryos somewhere else. So I had 5 eggs. So at the time, it's only me doubting myself now. The more I find out, the more eggs people get. But I thought I had 5 chances, and 5 seemed like the possibilities were endless. I was like, oh my God, I could have 5 children. That would be weird.
Yeah. The reason I stumbled on my words there, I nearly said 8, is because I got 8 eggs. So that's why I sort of said 8. But I remember we were in a room next to somebody, and we got told we got 8 eggs, and I think they got 21. And then immediately I was like, oh, fuck, I've not done well enough. I've not done it properly. I'm not good enough. We're fucked. Like, we've wasted all that money. And like, it's weird when you compare to other people, because there's people online who get like 35 eggs, and you're like, what
do they do?
I get 38 from, and I get 8, and you got 5. It's like, it's really easy to then, you know, doubt yourself and question yourself and be annoyed at yourself and not doing good enough.
Yeah,
like,
I know.
I found that really hard.
Getting the trust back in your body, going, oh, is it doing the right thing? And I think, as we know with anything, you know, comparison is such a thief of joy. I can't remember. What's the phrase?
Comparison is the thief of joy.
Yeah. And everyone has their own journey and should have their own journey. But I think probably like you, when it comes to the fact of a long journey, I'm overusing the word journey now, but a long time or experience that you've had, you just want as much opportunity, or as many opportunities and chances as you possibly could. So I was like, okay, I've got 5. So then what happens, and you may remember this, is that you have this awful 24-hour wait to find out if actually any of Nick's sperm has actually, it's all right about getting the egg collection, but what they've got to do then is fertilize them. So actually is Nick's sperm going to attach to any of them? And we got a call the next morning and we were told that 3 had fertilized, 1 egg was abnormal, and 1 didn't fertilize, and 3 had. So from 5 till 3 it went down. And then yeah, sorry.
The next stage then is how many? Because I think it's then like 6 days or something, is it?
Yeah.
Or 5 days or something?
5 days. We decided to do a 5-day transfer. So you can get the option about 3 days, and it is down to personal choice. But we decided for 5 days. So then what our clinic did was like booked in the egg collection for 5 days after, booked in the embryo transfer for 5 days after the egg collection. And they said, we got the news on the Saturday morning that 3 had been fertilized overnight, but they still had to make it to blastocyst stage, which is the 5 days.
Yeah.
If you don't hear from us, come in as normal.
Okay.
But we might give you a phone if no survive. We didn't pay for the extra of daily updates. Now, I don't know whether we should or whether we shouldn't have. It doesn't really matter now, because I think getting the updates, unfortunately, it's nature's hands. I think getting updates about it is not going to change the outcome of what happened. But we got told, we didn't get a phone call. So we're like, brilliant, we're in. And actually on the journey, on the way up to the embryo transfer, the app that you get with your fertility clinic kind of pinged away, and I got a little photo through, and I was like, well, we've got one. It's made it. When we arrived there, we were told that they were transferring a good quality embryo. I think they grade it 1 to 4 out of 2 types. Some people do it A to D. I think our clinic was like 1 to 4, and it was a 2-2 embryo. And then we were told that one of them didn't make it, and didn't make it through to 5 days, and that the other one was still they wanted to leave actually right up to the end of the 5th day, and to see, because it wasn't quite where they wanted it to be, and they still felt that the extra time could do it, but they were confident over this lucky ducky, we named it, could be transferred. So it was transferred, what was it, about 10 days before my 40th birthday.
Okay. And were you pretty confident that everything would be okay with that one? Or did you have sort of doubts because of the previous miscarriages?
God, it's so confusing then, because again, you start looking at like IVF success rates. And then but actually with an embryo being implanted in you, I was like, when it says like 5% of over 40s kind of, get pregnant the first time, I'm like, well, actually it's 50-50 for me. It's either going to implant or it's not going to implant. And I kind of we were like, oh, lucky duckies fought for this. So let's do it. So we had that like 2-week wait. But because it was my 40th birthday, we'd pre-booked a local holiday, so we decided not to go to abroad, but we'd pre-booked some time off, and we thought we'll still go on holiday. And I remember that was like the best thing we ever did, because actually I wasn't pacing around the house. I was just away. We had England was kind to us. The weather was good. It was June. It was early June. And I just had to block it out. And I kept questioning myself. Again, you can relate, and all the IVF warriors can relate to this, that you start like going, oh no, my boobs are getting big. Oh no, I can feel it. Oh no, it's too late. Oh no, the baby, because also remember the baby's developed for 5 days once it's put in. So it becomes more exact. So you know your exact date that you've conceived as such. But something else was also happening in my life then, when I was actually looking for a career change. And when I was on holiday, I saw an advert for a job I really, really wanted. And Nick was like, had told me a few weeks previously, like, is now a really good time? We're just about to do an embryo transfer. And I was like, oh, and I had the CV on my phone. So I like applied for a job as well. But what had actually happened is the day later she'd got it, because the closing date was going to be after I'd got back. She wanted to speak to me straight away. And she wanted to organise an interview with me. So that was all going on, which was good, because it kind of like put me off thinking about night and day whether this embryo had actually attached or not.
A good distraction.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you then went for the scan at 8 weeks, and you said you confused because you felt really pregnant.
I was so pregnant by then, Rosie. I was like, I've got twins.
Wow.
I was like, that feeling where, like, your boobs are on fire. You've gone back to telling Nick to fuck off a lot. You're kind of like going, oh my God, you've got really strong pregnancy tests as well. Because like some of mine in the past have been quite faint, and they always say if it's positive, it's positive. It doesn't matter the deepness of the colour. But I think you're always looking for a dark test that comes up instantly, aren't you? Yeah, so I was like, full in pregnant. And also reverting back to the story I just shared, I interviewed for this job and got this job and accepted a job as well. So I'd also handed in my notice at my old work at this time. And we had an 8-week scan, which they do between 8 to 9 weeks after with IVF as an early scan. So I thought that was great. And I was like, great, well, we've got to 8 weeks. This is amazing. And I remember Nick feeling really anxious about it, like slightly terrified, actually. And I hope he doesn't mind me saying that. And I hope I'm not over egging that emotion for him. But I remember being a bit kind of like, because again, when it's happening to you, you feel in control a bit more. So I was a bit like, don't worry, babes. Like, I would be more surprised if we got twins, like in there, as my nipples are sticking out, and like, you're kind of planned everything and potentially thinking, God, actually, it could be twins. Oh my God, we could change that room into that, So did the drive. And got into the scan, and there was no heartbeat. And I haven't experienced that before, because I've had physical signs and there was no physical signs. And when I'm talking about physical signs, I mean bleeding or spotting. So I was like, oh, wow, that's deep. And hearing that is, I can hear it in my emotion now. It's sad.
I'm so sorry.
Thank you. It's just, it's a dark place to go back to, those, horrible, grey, uninviting medical rooms when, as a woman, you've got your legs up in stirrups, and, and then they have to get a second person in. So you're kind of just like this waiting, and then you're like, oh, so yeah, that was tough, actually, because again, similar to the fourth pregnancy, I really had let joy in. I was like, this is it, we're gonna rock this. So we found that out. I'm sorry for my emotion.
No, don't apologize ever.
It caught me by surprise. Not that I should be sorry for it. It's perfectly natural. No. And the weird thing about grief is it does show up at very bizarre times. Obviously, we're particularly talking about it now, but I've talked about it only last week and I was absolutely fine. So it's interesting, isn't it, that how it appears.
Yeah. Never apologize for crying or having emotions, especially when it comes to infant loss.
Yeah.
You have to explain why you're sad or why you're crying or apologize for that. So don't feel
the need to do that. Good point. Well put. Absolutely. So that happened. So then we got ushered into the room, given the leaflets again, and we're told if we wanted to wait 2 weeks, because I hadn't had any physical signs, to wait 2 weeks, and if not, we can get referred for medical management. And I was like, well, my body knows, it's done it before, it knows what to do. I don't really want to talk about medical management now. But again, going back to what you said right at the beginning, when we were discussing my first miscarriage, like that time of my life was very strange. I got to 2 weeks and I was like, mentally, I couldn't deal with it anymore. I was like, okay, nothing was starting at all. And I was like, okay, wrote to the GP, and the next day things happened on their own. But that 2 weeks in my life was probably, I would say, out of the whole journey, probably the toughest mentally. Yeah.
Did you still feel pregnant during that time as well?
Yeah, really pregnant, because I felt, and that fifth pregnancy, and I don't know whether, excuse me,
do you have a drink?
The fifth pregnancy, I don't know whether it was because of the extra hormones and because I was taking progesterone as well, whether that, I don't know, I'm making this all up now, whether that made me feel even more pregnant or whatever. But, you know, I felt kind of raging with hormones. And yeah, so that 2 weeks was a bit like, it was tough.
Yeah.
It all happened. And then it just didn't stop. So what I basically was nearly miscarrying for as long as I was pregnant for. It just kind of continued throughout the whole summer.
Yeah, you wrote that you had a miscarriage and it lasted over 8 weeks.
Yeah.
Did you go to the doctors about that, about the bleeding?
Yeah, because it kind of stopped. It started, then it stopped. And then my friends were like, I think you should probably go to the doctors. And I was like, yeah, I probably should. And I'm doing that thing where if I was advising my friend, I'd be like, I think you should. But I was doing that typical thing where people were telling me and I just wasn't listening. I was like, yeah. And then it got to a point where I remember once where I was sitting on the toilet about 6 or 7 weeks in, and it just like had this massive rush where it just didn't stop. And I was like, and also quite unsightly clots and everything. So I did contact the GP, and I did actually get referred back to the early pregnancy unit, even though there was some argy-bargy saying that I should go to the IVF clinic. And I was like, I'm not going to drive 2 hours to go to the IVF clinic. So eventually I got an appointment at my early pregnancy unit, and they weren't sure if it was a blood vessel still stuck or what do they call it, remains pregnancy. I can't remember the terminology now. Is it some? We'll have to look it up and put it on screen. But you know, pregnancy related products. That's what they call it. Still left. So the same thing happened, and that's when I saw that lovely sonographer again, who remembered me, and she said, "I'm so sorry to see you back. Like, what was it, 4 or 5 years later, for the same situation." So I had to go back 3 weeks later. They wanted me to wait, and in which time it had stopped a week after that. But I continued to go for that scan just to check everything out, and everything looked very normal again internally when I did go back 3 weeks later.
Okay. Gosh, that doesn't sound fun at all. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, it was, you know, again, it's interesting in life how we all carry on when you're through that process. And again, maybe you can relate to this as well, that you just do, don't you? You carry on. Yeah. And then actually when conversations like this come up, when you're kind of actually going through the whole journey, because sometimes when I talk to people, it might be segments of it, or, you know, or that happened last year, or this happened, but actually, and maybe that's where the emotion stirred, like talking about it as a whole. It's like, God, it's quite a lot, isn't it? And I need to recognize that and be kind to myself, that it's a period of 6 years of my life, and particular formative years of my life as well, kind of going into my 40s. And I think turning 41 last week, you kind of go, yeah, actually that's been a big part of my adult life.
Yeah, it is a lot. And I think, you know, it's hard sometimes in the moment to realize just how big something is. And it's only when you do things like this, when you talk about it, like the whole journey, and you're like, holy shit, that's been a lot for me to deal with these past however many years. And it's a lot to go through. So
and when we had the review with the IVF consultant, his language then was like, oh yeah, 1 is unlucky, or 2 is quite unlucky, 3, oh yeah, that's very unlucky, 4, and he was like naming them all, 5, oh yeah, that's really unusual, and we're like, okay, yeah, we know that, we don't need to go through that. But then that was when my partner Nick suggested about further blood tests that we could do, which is when he mentioned about chirotyping.
And could you tell me about what chirotyping is?
Sure. So we'd been talked about this on the NHS before, and I was trying to refer back to my NHS notes, and they were going to offer it to us, and they were halfway through the process and never actually followed it up. And that was, whether that's I don't quite know what happened, but it was kind of earmarked for us. But chirotyping is a simple blood test, but then it's particularly looked at your DNA or your chromosomal, if that's a word, makeup that you have. And the reason that miscarriages can happen is because you have chromosome abnormalities which have carried in the female's eggs or the male's sperm. Right. Now, Nick brought this up with the consultant because it been in the peripheral of our brains about kind of thinking that if we suffer from recurrent miscarriage, there could be something further than the normal results of our standard blood test. And he was like, oh, that's a good idea, because at this the review meeting, he was suggesting about genetic testing when the embryos are actually formed. If we went through our next round of fertility treatment. And he said, oh, but to cross the T's and dot the I's, actually we could start there, because then at least we'd know if individually you've got any chromosome issues. So we decided to go private with the same clinic again. So it was £500 each. It was £1,000. But we thought it was an investment, because otherwise we're looking at another £15,000 for the next lot of treatment. So if we could prevent or have some more knowledge of before that started. So we did that. The results take about 6 to 8 weeks to come in. And then I got a call to try and book in the result conversation. And the nurse said to me, oh, and also the doctor said that he'd like to refer you to genetic counselling. And I said, oh, why would I need genetic counselling? I don't even know the results yet. Is that saying that there's something more negative that you want to talk to me about? Oh, I don't know. Oh, sorry. Oh, I don't know. Maybe you should speak to the doctor. So it was all a bit weird. And then we had a video call with the doctor, and he said, oh, so you've seen the results? And I was like, no. Anyway, what it turns out that I am actually what they call a balanced translocation chromosome carrier. And in layman's terms, we all have, if we don't have any genetic abnormalities, we all have 20 chromosomes, which are made up of 2 strands. And as it happens, my chromosome 16 and my chromosome 20 have 1 strand swapped over. So, and that's why it's called a balanced translocation. So my chromosomes are actually balanced because I've got 2 strands in each chromosome, but it just so happens that 2 are mixed up. Now, that can happen with any of the chromosomes. So it could be 1 and 6, it could be your 6 and 7. It just so happens with me it's 16 and 20. And why that doesn't cause me any health implications. Otherwise, that would have shown from birth or from now. But what that does mean is, because I'm a carrier that's carried into my eggs, what they can't tell me is how many of my eggs carry that chromosome abnormality. And where they would say, and what they would do, what they feel is, because that's a chromosome abnormality, the eggs that have been fertilized in my previous pregnancies have had that chromosome abnormality, which is why miscarriages have occurred. So it's Mother Nature's way of slightly protecting the future child, or the future from having maybe something life limiting or anything that may cause them harm in the future. So it's done its cleanse. So there's thinking now that I've been diagnosed with that, that's more than likely the reason of having and experiencing those miscarriages. So it only sadly took me 5 miscarriages to find that out, which is why I'd like to, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about it. I do feel that if people are suffering from recurrent miscarriage or even a miscarriage, that they should talk to their doctor, whether they're within the NHS in the England or whatever service you have, of actually getting that as an extra blood test just on top of the standard ones that are available.
Did that bring you peace, knowing that that's what potentially caused the miscarriages?
It's an interesting question, that, because a lot of people have asked me that, Rosie, and it has, because I think knowledge is power, but I also believe there's a bit of assumption to go on that that's what's caused the miscarriages. They can't really tell, but it does make sense. And so, yes, I think it's nice to know that, and it helps us, and it's helping us decide on what our future is, because I think our chance of becoming parents, now we know that, are slightly different, although we could continue to try naturally. You're basically playing an egg lottery, really, and experience is telling me that my 5 previous pregnancies haven't worked out. So yeah, I think I kind of feel at peace in the sense where it is helping us with our future, and actually that maybe there was a reason that they didn't carry further on. But again, it's so difficult to know if that's the actual truth in the matter anyway.
Yeah, we're similar, my husband and I. So we're both carriers of a very rare form of dwarfism, which is why we had the termination.
Right.
And it's one of them where it's like, if we were to decide to carry on, which at the moment we're not, but if we did decide to do that, is it worth the heartache of probably having another miscarriage? Because that might happen again. And it's good to have that information. And yes, we can continue trying, but also it's probably going to happen again. So it kind of puts you in this, it's good to know, but also
what do we do with that?
What do you do with that information?
Yeah.
So I saw you said about having genetic testing of embryos or getting an egg donor. Is that something you're considering? So I saw that at the moment you're sort of taking a step back from fertility for your own.
We've been quite bold, and we're actually taking a year off completely. And I know that might seem to others that's quite a bold statement considering my age as well. So the recommended treatment for us would be really IVF again. And that would be about me actually undergoing 3 continual egg collections, which means getting as many eggs as possible, due to, again, history telling us that I only got 5 the first time. I say only, but as we've talked about varying numbers, that is more on the lower end of numbers. That they recommend doing 3, which means I'd be on treatment for potentially that could take anywhere between 3 to 6 months, depending on where my cycles fall and what breaks were needed. Because what they would want is as many eggs as possible to be fertilized, as Nick's not a chromosome carrier and his sperms come back and his genetics have come back fine, because then they would create as many embryos as they could, because then they would go for this specific embryo genetic testing. What that means, if they found any genetic abnormalities, whether it relates to my chromosome disorder or not, those eggs legally in the UK are not allowed to be transferred back into you.
Yeah.
So you could be risking 3 to 15 to 16 to 20 embryos, but you may or may not get any chance of actually having an embryo transfer and a chance of a pregnancy from that. So that's risky. The other thing they've heavily talked about, and I did take up the genetic counselling which was offered by the clinic, and they do that free of charge as part of the package, is an egg donor. And that means using someone else's eggs, potentially who's a lot younger than I am as well, who have been through all of this testing before, so they're genetically should we say, genetically normal, if that's the right word. And that meant that the child wouldn't actually be genetically mine. It would be Nick's, because it would be fertilized with Nick's sperm. But I would be the carrier of the child, as that embryo would be transferred back into my uterus to be able to become pregnant and give birth. But actually, in DNA wise, we wouldn't be linked.
How does that sit with you? Is that something you would do?
It's interesting because and I want to do more reading on this, but there's lots of research coming through to say that, and the way the consultant explained to me, that hard genetics can't be changed. So eye colour, hair colour, potentially body shape and type, but soft genetics, and this is the nature versus nurture argument, that the body's an amazing thing. So when you're growing a baby, and like I said, I apologise if I'm simplifying this to any of the consultants or embryologists and scientists and biologists out there, but I suppose this is my view of looking at it, that, you know, our body even produces, when you're pregnant, a whole new organ, doesn't it? Like the placenta is like, it develops. It's an amazing thing, the woman's human body in doing that. So it's sharing your blood straight away, it's sharing all of you, and I think there's something to say about that. Whether that actually carries through, I don't know, but I think for me, carrying a baby and birthing a baby, I think that's still family, and I think family comes in so many different forms. So I feel at peace with that as being an option. And I will share with you, and it's a conversation Nick and I have had, that if we decide that we want to go down trying for more children, we would potentially probably take the egg donor route. I don't physically think I could do 3 rounds of egg collection and then the transfer, and then invest that money to not know whether any of them would come back viable as well. So definitely egg collection is on the cards, and I'd be open to anyone who egg donor is on the cards, and open to any conversations around that. I do know a few people that have had successful pregnancies from it, and yeah, their children are amazing. So it's definitely something that I would consider, or we would consider.
It's interesting when you're put in situations like that where you have to consider these things. Like, like I said, we don't have children. We're not trying anytime soon.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you have to think about, well, you don't have to, but we chose to think about, okay, well, would we do sperm donation? Because we're both carriers, so one of us would have to, you know, either way.
Yeah.
So it's like, would you consider doing that, even if it's not genetically yours? Or would you adopt? Or would you, like, just try again otherwise? Or would you do the IVF route and test all the embryos? And like, there's just so many different options, which is amazing. There's always options, but it's also conversations that I bet 6 years ago you didn't think you'd be saying to your husband, hey, let's think about getting another egg donor, like
exactly.
You know, an egg donor.
It's again, I was only just talking about this last week, that it brings up so many conversations. Another conversation Nick and I have talked about is, what if the desire to have a child is overwhelming compared to someone else? So where's the compromise? We've talked about, do we need to break up if that happens? If his desire to be a father is so strong and I desire to be child free, where do you find that compromise as a partnership? Where do you put your 10 years or nearly 10 years for us together on that? And I don't know whether you and your husband have discussed that or not, but all of these things, how do I feel about having a child, like you said, that's not genetically mine, or maybe wouldn't be genetically his? Do we want to discuss adoption? I mean, at the moment, my favourite thing is about having 32 cats. So, I mean, that's the thing that I'm settling with. And like, when can we get our next kitten? So, you know, family comes in so many different things, but I would never have dreamt about having an open discussion with my partner about breaking up for something that, not that I can't give him, but something that we don't agree on, or a desire for one another is much stronger. So I don't think most people have those conversations in their relationships.
No, but just to be open with you as well. So back in 2020, after my 4th loss, Jeremy said to me he doesn't want to have children anymore. Like it's just his mindset. He doesn't want that anymore. Like it's not anything he desires. He's terrified to see me pregnant. He doesn't want me to be sat on the floor crying again. And after the termination in 2017, I was at such a low point where I was considering ending my life. I've spoken about this a few times. Like I was really, really low. And for him, it's not worth me getting pregnant to potentially lose his wife if I mentally can't cope with it. And so he said to me he doesn't want children anymore. We did embryo freezing in 2022, 2021, something like that. But yeah, when he said that to me in 2020, it was kind of well, do I either want to be with my husband that I've been with since 2010, or do I really want a family more than I want to be with him? And therefore, I leave him and try and find someone else. And I was already, 35 or something, or I don't know what age I was. I don't know. But I'm already a certain age, and do I want to be with him and potentially never have children, or do I want to leave him and find someone else and have children on my own, or never have children? It's just like you have all these weird conversations that you don't ever imagine having because you think you're with your person forever, and that's everything's going to be happy ever after. You'll have your children, you'll get married, have kids, have fun, live until you're 90, and that's but it doesn't always happen that way, and you do have to have these hard conversations. And I think again it's something that people don't really open up about and talk about because it's scary, and you're scared to get judged. And I'm obviously happy with Jeremy, but also my whole life I've wanted children, and we're now at a stage where like we've got one good we did embryo freezing, we did testing as well because we're both carriers, so we got 8 eggs. I think 5 fertilized and 3 made it to day 5, but one had a genetic disorder and one had a chromosome abnormality, whatever it is. So we've got one frozen somewhere that I don't even know if we're ever going to use. But yeah, these conversations are tough. And
they are, and I really empathize with you, and I'm really sorry to hear that you felt so low at those points, because no one should ever feel like that. But it's like you said, it's tough. Like I never thought I'd have to like kind of make a judgment call about, and I don't think we are going to break up, by the way. Caveat, Nick, it's okay. I'm not announcing to the world that I'm ending our relationship. But it's good to, and I'm glad that this has come up in our conversation, because I'm sure it's something that actually gets spoken about behind closed doors that we should bring up a bit more. And also for the partner's sake, we've touched on it before about how difficult it is emotionally for the partners who aren't going through it. But I'm 6 months into the year we're having off, and I feel good. I feel a little bit more further and further away each day about becoming a mum and choosing to be child free. But that's what this year's all about. I'm not saying it's so fluid, as you know, this whole emotion about babies is so fluid. So, I can't say for sure, but I do know that there's a good life for me ahead of me if children, my own children, aren't in it. I'm lucky enough to have so many children in my life. But if my own children aren't in it, I'm going to stick with the 32 cats that Nick's promised me I can have at one point in my life.
Just to let you know, if you don't end up trying again, or you do try again and it's not successful, there is a whole community of people that are childless not by choice. Sandra, somebody I spoke to on the podcast, you can look at the comments.
I will.
It was fantastic. And there's a whole group of women who either got pregnant and lost their pregnancies, or never got pregnant because of situations or finances or whatever it is. So just to let you know, and people watching, either way, there is a whole community of people that are also childless not by choice, and there's people you can talk to about these concerns and about emotions and how you're feeling and how do you move forward, and you're doing the right thing, or
No, thank you. Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I found a few via Instagram who I've been following, and it's a really lovely connection for me at the moment, because I'm kind of like in between this, and I don't. And the funny thing about identity, when you go through a period of your life, and I don't know if you felt like this, you identify as it, don't you? So I was identifying as a woman struggling with fertility, and now I'm like, where is my identity? Am I child free by choice? Am I child free not by choice? Or am I still in my fertility era? So, all of this, which is why I was quite firm about saying I want a year. I don't think things should be rushed. And I know that I'd like to be 21 again and have all the time in the world, but I actually still think they shouldn't be rushed. And so, because potentially if we do decide and have an egg donor, that gives us a bit more time as well. But yeah, no, it's a really good point. It's about finding your tribe, isn't it? And at the moment, I'm not quite sure if I'm in any tribe. But I really empathise with all of the tribes that are out there.
Okay, well, you and me, we're in the same tribe because I'm also not childless, not by choice, but I'm also not trying to get pregnant.
Yeah. Okay. So let's start that one, shall we?
Yeah. I've not been pregnant since 2020. I'm not trying to get pregnant anytime soon, but I'm also not like definitely never having kids. I've not like drawn the line and like closed the door and said that's definitely not happening for us. So I'm somewhere in the middle as well.
Okay.
Figuring it out, not trying, but also, not never.
Not never, I know. And I've been playing around with my language recently, Rosie, where like telling people actually I'm not going to have children. And then kind of like you wake up one day and you're like, oh, should I have said that? Because now they're kind of going to expect me not to have children. And this is where being open with people is really tough, because it's so fluid. And then, you know, I have people going, do you want to talk about it? And I'm like, oh no, I'm so bored about talking about miscarriage. But then I want to talk about it because it's so important that we do. So I've always been an advocate for being open, but you know, it's typical us, isn't it, on our own terms when we want it. So, you know, but yeah, maybe we start up a new confused tribe somewhere. That we can say all sorts of these things that we feel. But
I think that's the thing as well. You said about it being confusing. It's funny because sometimes I'm like, oh my God, thank God we don't have children. Like, this is going to sound awful after 4 losses, I know, but like, I can wake up at 10 a.m. I don't have to do the school run. I don't have to feed any kids. I don't have any kids crying. I can travel when I want, where I want. I've been to Thailand, Germany. I'm currently in Serbia. Like, I can go home and see my parents for 2 months if I want to and not have to worry about school or homework. And like, there's so many benefits.
Yeah.
But also there's other days where I'm like, oh my God, I would love to have a kid at Christmas time, or like celebrate their birthdays, or go on holidays, or see my parents be grandparents to my children, or like have my nephews have cousins. And like there's so many sides to it where like one day I'm like, oh thank fuck that never happened, like it was a blessing in disguise. It sounds horrendous to say. I know we're going to get hated for saying that. And then there's other days where I'm like, oh my God, that's the one thing I want that's probably never going to happen, and I'm still trying to come to terms with like grieving the life that I thought I would have, but then also celebrating the life I do have. And like it's
all of these things, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think, you know, again, a conversation I was having last week when I was talking about this, but I was like, I feel like I'm in a good place, and I'm excited about the future. I'm excited about possibilities, and this isn't taking away the fact that you can't do amazing things with children. You know, I've got lots of inspirational people in my life, and I don't know how they do it. I honestly, I mean, I find committing to feeding my cat in the morning difficult. Do you know what I mean? So like, you know, these like, absolutely, I respect parents to the 8th degree and how they manage things. But I think what I want to try and uncover this year was really live into the value of freedom that not having children potentially can give you, because you've just mentioned some of the wonderful things we can do, and I could make a whole list. You know, my friends are jealous. I have an afternoon nap and the weekends whenever I want, and that's so valuable to me, because I'm such, you know, I'm an introverted extrovert. I like give out all my energy and then I need to retract quite a bit and recharge, so I can just take a nap. I went out for a run this morning, and I'm not saying that mothers or fathers can't do that, but it has to be a bit pre-planned. Someone has to compromise with their life, some career. I don't have to live by a compromise. And I want to try and really live by that for the next 6 months, and possibly beyond that. What can I achieve if being a parent doesn't come to me? What can I really achieve? What's my impact? How do I want to be remembered? And I think being a parent is a wonderful thing to be remembered by, but I think there's other things out there as well.
I think also for me, the longer I don't have children, the less I want children.
Yeah, okay.
And I'd be interested to see if you're the same after a year or longer or whatever. But like, the more the longer I go without children, or without being pregnant, the more I'm like, oh my God, I can't ever see that happening. And it just seems to be getting like further and further away from me, which is interesting.
Yeah.
I think as well, something that, like, when me and my husband first started trying in 2016, you just think you're just going to have kids and you don't really think about it. Whereas these days I'm like, do I really, really want this? Like, after going through 4 losses, it's like such a conscious decision.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I love my life that I'm living right now. Do I want to compromise that and have children? Even though it wouldn't be a compromise, that sounds awful. Again, I'm saying the wrong thing, I know. But like, it's just such a conscious decision. Whereas when we started the first time, it's just like, oh, everyone gets married and has kids. It's just what you do.
Just jump into bed, or maybe not bed even, and you just get on with it. And no, again, Rosie, you're totally right. Like, I've used those exact words to people. Kind of, it's a very conscious decision for Nick and I to continue with our fertility journey, because I, rightly or wrongly, do not want to try naturally again, because I don't want to. I want to minimize the risk of having another miscarriage. So we would have to financially, and again, the cost of fertility treatment is actually a commitment within itself, to even, let alone in today's world and the economic climate we're currently living in, to even have a child that costs money as well, getting to that stage. So I think I do understand why you say the furthest you've been from pregnant. For me, it's actually the older I'm getting. And maybe that's because I'm actually like a bit stuck in my ways now, or actually if it did happen 10 years ago, that would have been okay. But I think particularly economically and everything like that, the way the world's going, like, it's becoming more tricky to do certain things as well.
I think, like you said, though, like, had I had children the first time round 10 years ago, I would have, loved them, been obsessed with them, would have been the best thing ever. I think it's also like an age thing, and there's just a lot of factors that come into it. So well, I think what you're doing by giving yourself a year, both of you, to figure out what you want out of life, and if you'd be happy potentially without children, or if you do go ahead and try the egg donation thing, like, I think it's important, like you said, to give yourself time and have that space and really open, honest conversations about what you both want out of life. And if it is a life together doing XYZ, or doing the other option, or if it's separate, or whatever it is. But, having these conversations is, it's hard, but it's the best thing to do, because then that you're both getting what you want, I guess, out of life. So
absolutely. And I think whatever life throws at you, ultimately, sounds obvious, but life is for living, isn't it? And there's no rights or wrongs, and there shouldn't be any judgment. And unfortunately, there is, the first question most people ask me is, do you have children still? It's still a conversational party starter. So we've got a long way to go, like, in society, but ultimately I feel strongly that, whatever decision we make is the right decision for us.
Sorry, I know I've been speaking to you like 2 hours now, so I'm taking so much of your time.
No, it's absolutely fine. I've just seen my friend arrive, but the door is open, so she can sit inside for a few moments and wait.
Okay. I wanted to ask you, what do you say when people do ask if you have children? Because that's always an interesting one.
Yeah, it's like, there's funny enough, there's quite a lot of memes that go around. It's like, do I trauma dump, or do I just ignore it? And you know what? I will have to say that it really depends on how I feel and who it is, and actually what the occasion is. So, of course, I'm never going to lie. I've never gone to that extent where I'm like, oh, yes, little Henrietta's at home waiting for me, looking after herself. But I have, mainly my answer has been, it hasn't quite worked out for us, but we're in the midst of trying. So, and then if people want to take that any further with me, I will be very open and honest with them. But I felt that's the most honest way of saying it, because it's not a no, but it's not like I don't empathise with parenthood at all. I've had varying different reactions from that. Some people do, and those are the people that are curious enough and to ask, and I'll give them the response. Others are like, okay, well, and some people say, wish you the best of luck or whatever, and we move on to something else. A lot of the time, and that's generally been the kind of the 2-sentence answer that I've given. Obviously, I'm trying a different responses now because, like we've just discussed, we're in that kind of weird transitional period. For the first time at an exercise class a couple of weeks ago, someone actually asked me that question because I was talking about her child. She had mentioned to me her kids were going to come up to be on half term and everything. And I actually said it didn't work out for us. So I actually changed it to say that, to see how that felt, which was a bit more absolute rather than saying we're currently in that phase. It was me trying to, and I said, I was like, ooh, I said that. So I got home and told a few friends and told Nick, and I was like, my language changed. And that felt okay. And she was like, yeah, I understand. And then I followed it up. I did the British polite thing. Oh, but that gives me so many other opportunities, feeling like I slightly had to lean into the fact to justify it, which is strange. But yeah, those are kind of, like I said, my go-to line is usually being like, we're in the midst, it hasn't quite worked out for us. And depending on who it is, it's either engaged the conversation or it hasn't.
Yeah. So I have 4 questions that I like to ask people when they tell me their story, just to kind of get different perspectives on what people would say, their advice, basically.
Yep.
So what do you want other women experiencing infant loss to know?
I think the main one, and you may hear this a lot, but you're not alone. And I know it sounds simple, but I can't say it more and more, is that there's so many resources out there and people out there. And I'd also like people to be brave enough to share their stories as well, because I think we all might be tiny cogs in a big machine, but those tiny cogs make the big machine go round. So never underestimate what influence or how much support or help you could be to someone else going through it as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of people out there that are compassionate and they understand what you're going through as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah.
Number 2, what do you wish society knew about infant loss?
That's a big one, isn't it? I think how delicate it is, how much it affects people. Actually, I think society don't realise like how much of this happens. And again, it seems bonkers that we're in 2025, but that relates back to my first answer about talking about it is the only way to know. So yeah, I think it would be nice to look at more ways of supporting everyone, partners and people, and the carriers of babies, of how to go through it. So yeah, not realizing like how deep it can actually go for people.
Yeah, I agree. What helped and what didn't help with your healing journey?
I've mentioned it before, the outdoors. I've said it before, Mother Nature, where I believe that sometimes she has a bit of an ultimate power. I'm not saying that she knew that my miscarriages were going to happen or not, but I don't know. I believe that there is a slight force out there, being outside, whether you're walking, running, sitting in the sunshine, sunbathing. I think there's a power of being outside. So definitely that's been helpful, and I would recommend that to anyone. What hasn't been helpful, I think, and weirdly, this is down to myself again, but pressures you think you feel from either your work or society or your partner, how to be, I should be like this. And we're the only ones that can actually control that ourselves, because there are actually our own thoughts. It's not necessarily that I've been told I had to get back to work, or Nick's told me I have to be happy tonight, or anything like that. But there's definitely some kind of, I think what could be really helpful is a lot, is having more access to mindset work, and actually how kind of our own minds can help us on our healing journey rather than actually hinder it, which sometimes they do.
Yeah, I love that response. And then the last one is, what advice do you have for partners, friends and family to help with somebody going through infant loss?
I think acknowledging it and acknowledging milestones still, no matter how old they may feel. Weirdly, I wrote this this morning that I feel the biggest misconception about grief is that it gets easier, and it doesn't. And that's okay. Grief is incredibly wibbly and wobbly. It's no straight line. So it doesn't matter if it's a certain amount of anniversaries or anything, that they should still be recognised, I think. And actually just to listen. People want to go into fixing mode, but you can't fix certain things. And I think this falls under that bracket because there's so many unknowns involved. And so, it's just about listening. And lots of chocolate. So just bring down lots of chocolate.
I agree on that one. I'm also a big chocolate fan, so chocolate always helps.
Certainly does.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story today. Honestly, I'm so thankful that people like you come on and just share openly and vulnerably. And obviously, I'm so sorry for your losses. I'll be interested to see what happens in your future. So I'll be following you on Instagram. I'll leave your link down below as well so people can follow along.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. Yes, and I'll be sharing lots, and we'll be in contact anyway. And of course, we're the starters of this new tribe anyway, Rosie. So we've got to remain in contact and set that up. It's been a real pleasure talking to you, and I hope not you but others have found it useful. And like I said, if you share my link, I'm happy for anyone to contact me and reach out if there's something I've said that resonates, or if they just want to chat. I'm here.
Well, thank you so much.
Pleasure. Absolute pleasure.